Okay, my name's Alberto. I am going to be talking about my final project. I owe this typography to Marty and Rebecca, who wrote it in the summer when we were doing some design camp. Before we start, I want to have a little look here, and I want to know where are we here for my audience. Lincoln said this earliest in the year, and if you have the eyes at the bottom, that means you want to shoot me or kill me. So I'm just going to glance around for a second. Before I start, I want to take a little second for a last-minute comment, why I'm here or how I got here. I came to grad school looking for a change, and of course, I found a change. But the change didn't happen in isolation. And I think that part of this, the experience of being here was the family that I now belong to. And I think that, being part of this family is really important. Actually, no, what's really important is, the people that were here for me. I was in a particular situation. I had 3 older sisters and 1 older brother for the last month. That all of them, I learned a lot from them. I wanted to kill them at times, and they wanted to kill me at times. So it makes it very interesting. But being here was also not about, me and the context that I was in, but also the opportunity that I was able to learn from others younger than me, and that I had the opportunity to teach other younger than me. And I see some of them came in the back. So, that's really important to me, too, that what I'm doing, I'm thinking it in the context of, where am I placed in relations to others. But that the experience that I did here and learned in grad school, helped me come up with this final document. So it doesn't happen only from my books. It doesn't happen only from being many hours in front of my huge screen, which gave me the tan for 2 years. But, that it's about the people that are here with me. Then, one of the first years a few weeks ago came and told us a story about final review and about how they were going to use computers because a class a few years ago had done posters, and that was horrible. We were that class, and these were the posters for my first semester. But what is interesting to me is that in first semester, I was the first one who came up with, I'm going to do posters. I'm the son of an architect. In architecture, everybody does posters. But what's interesting is that now, looking back at grad school, it's about how these posters came to life. And it's about how I learned that it's not about how necessarily I put something on paper, but it's about how people interact with it. It's about how people experienced it, and it's about people have to actually develop meaning from it. And in that context is that I come to talk to you today about choice architecture and graphic design. And this idea that I believe that graphic design can actually influence people in how they make decisions. Not in a big brother kind of way, not in a way of like, I'm going to tell you what's good for you, even though that's what I've been here for 2 years, where I've been learning all that. The first time that Santiago told me that every list has to have 3 items or it's not worth it. I learned it the first time. So we're going to be going through all of that. But what I want to talk about today is about consumers. And I want to talk about consumers and the idea of, not a consumer as someone who can buy, but a consumer who has a personality that is unstable. A consumer that is like, has multiple incongruities to it. It's a consumer that has 2 sides to itself. One times it can be happy, one times it can be sad, one times it can be responsible, one times it can be irresponsible. I'm still waiting for Rebecca to buy her iPhone. She's proved me wrong. Rebecca is always responsible with her economics. So, that kind of work. But what I'm interested in is that this research began by me reading a book about how we behave stupidly sometimes. And that was fascinating to me in the fact that we think we're being the most responsible ever, but we're actually not. And in this problem of personality, behavioral economics, actually, which is founded on this idea, they take it a little bit further. And they say not only are we bipolar in a way, but the problem is that we're predictably so. And behavioral economics says, with this predictability, we can intervene. We can help people. We can help them make a change. So I think that that's true, and I think that design can do it too. So just think of mind that every time that we're going to be talking about consumers here today, we're going to be talking about irrational actors. The idea of actors come influence from activity theory, which will go a little bit further. So, the problem with irrationality and being an irrational actor is that, sometimes you think you're right, sometimes you think you're not. Academics have been studying this, very particular to this idea of consumerism, and have come up with these personalities or traits that we all have, and that sometimes we may have, and sometimes we may not. And sometimes I may be, for example, a communicator, but sometimes I'm going to be an explorer, or the bigger issue when we're all of them at the same time. Because, there were some time constraints, I decided to only look at 3 of them at a time. And what I'm interested in is that these 3 personalities look at credit in a very, very different way. they look at credit as different tools. And that's what was interesting to me, because it's this idea that if I'm going to be framing a system, I cannot make a system that will help everybody, because eventually it will just come apart in a particular way. So I use these three personalities in order to read how each of them really influence the studies. You will have to refer to the written document, but know that these studies and screens that you will be seeing in a second are not actually based in isolation of just a made-up persona. Now, the question of being a consumer is, of course, based on this idea of having to make a choice. And the question is, are we free to choose? Yes, we are. But what a lot of research has found is that we always want the more choices and the more choices, but actually the more choices actually creates a problem. Because the more choices we have, the more choices, it's more harder to choose between one and another. One of the best studies is, have you ever gone into Trader Joe's and there's someone tasting jam and they have 30 pieces of jam? They did a study of a table with 30 and a table with 3. The table with 3 got 80% people buying one of those 3 jams. The table with 30 got a 10% return of people buying them in the store. So it's this idea that too many choices create a problem. And this idea that if we have too many problems, if we have too many options, and it leads us to confusion and not knowing how to reach, we're going to eventually make a mistake. And I think that design can have an impact on that. So being a consumer means that we have choice, we're irrational, and we're trying to get something. How we get something has many different ways. One of them ways that I'm going to be looking at is this idea of the credit card and the idea of credit as a tool, which allows me to get something when I particularly don't have the assets to achieve them at that particular time. Right now, this idea, like if you're running out of gas and you don't have money, you can just pull the credit card, fill up your tank, keep going, and then you'll deal with the debt later. But that, of course, keeps getting the debt up and up. Now, culture, this is not only for adults. Since you're children, these things have become a problem. Most of you have seen this. My particular favorite, the Princess Glam set. The kids now require a credit card to be a princess. I actually have all the requirements to be a princess, which is really fascinating to me. But we cannot ignore this. And the bottom line is that credit cards are here to stay. And no matter, we may not like them, we may think that this is wrong. We all know that an interest rate on a credit card is crazy. There's still people out there who put mortgages on houses on credit cards, and a mortgage on a house on a credit card. So you can imagine how crazy that sounds. So there are other people who have recognized the same that I'm recognizing today, and they have tried to do different things. The government has this website that is basically the most informative website you will find on a credit card ever. Is it easy to use? No. Do you want to return? No. Is it easy to navigate once you're inside of it? Awful. We all know QuickBooks, Quicken, all of these financial software, which actually they're a miracle, but they require very different levels of engagement to be able to use them. Discover Card recently launched this card analyzer. Genius updates up to life. The problem is you need to have a Discover credit card to use it. And Discover credit card is one of the lowest in the market right now. My personal favorite, Mint.com, which is a service that allows you to not be tied to one bank, bring all of your economic assets together, everything from bank accounts, mortgages, loans, etc. And they have a mobile component that allows you to take these finances with you all the time. For me to see that I have $6,000 on a credit card every day is kind of irritating. But it takes you with you. So they're already thinking of this idea of how to manage behavior at a certain time. But what I'm asking is, why are these solutions not reaching receptive audiences? And my issue is that I think that they're not entirely thinking of what a person's experience is in this whole matter. So in my opinion, these tools reside solely on these areas of what Hugo really calls the experience cycle, which basically they go from, some of them are really good at attracting people, some of them are very good at retaining people. Mint.com is actually a genius because once you have all of it in there and it updates for you real time, you really keep going. But it's really hard for these to become part of the day-to-day changing problems. David Rose's receptivity gradient, this idea that there are different levels of engagement into a problem. For the purpose of this study, because I couldn't process all of them, I decided to look at those who are ready to act. And what I'm interpreting is someone who's already in credit card debt, someone who knows it, and someone who wants to make a change about it. The idea of critical thinking and having abilities to critically think about a problem is really important to me. I will be focusing on people who are all the way already advancing into clarity about issues. And you will see in the final reflection there are many more areas here for intervention. So I ask, in what ways can design address consumption-induced behaviors through tools to help consumers in the management, in the control, and the personalization of fiscal activities? And this I broke up into understanding it in this particular study today in the mobile device. I'm seeing a larger system where an online database, online portal, desktop computer, and mobile device come together. I'm working on a work from the Japanese right now who are trying to get away from the credit card and have people pay with their cell phones. So the idea would be that the information doesn't necessarily have to update real time. It's just that it's going to register as you make a purchase. So this led to 3 studies. One of them in system defaults, one of them in choice, and one of them in feedback. Each of them has a different framing device. These framing devices are psychological forces or observations that have been made, or different system components that affects the way we work. So in the first study, the idea of defaults is the idea that the best information that we provide for people straight out will allow them to understand it better. In this case, not only is the user being presented with credit debt, loan debt, and bill debt, but also checking and savings pluses. They've been added up and tabulated for them. And a second representation, which is not accurate and not meant to provide specifics in the pie chart, is just meant to always hint at what are the situations that you're either in the worst trouble or in the best situation. Now, the user, this area is fully interactive, so if the lists were longer or the lists were shorter, the user can interact with them in different ways and could affect the different lists and add and delete, etc. Very simple behavior for those who have mobile device. Then the user can come and click. We're going to see a credit now, and in credit, we can see that the credit debt is right now being represented by a series of credit cards. We're interested in actually just go see the Discover card. And we're going to see that we're spending in bills, education, food, health, etc. These different categories allow us to understand more about the patterns where we are. And this is something that is very different from the way that the previous solutions are doing it, because they're trying to tell you that your Discover card, you spend $3,000, but as you go into it initially, it's already itemized. So you would see that you bought a book for $30, you bought a pencil for 25 cents. But this idea of categorization is not embedded completely into them. Now, in this idea, now we can go back and say, okay, so we've known that we're in debt, we know that we have a problem, okay, we can try to budget about it. And the system can start to recognize this idea that you've pre-budgeted, the numbers in gray. The numbers in green means that you're still within the budget of the month. The numbers in red means that you're way beyond the budget of the month. To start allowing people to recognize what they're doing. As you keep going in, you can realize that you're spending too much on fast food, so maybe a suggestion could be that you do not do this. And we'll go into suggestions of the system in a second. Then once you go into more detail, the idea becomes that you're using your credit card to pay, so you want to find out if you want actually to buy a particular item. First of all, you can look at categories, or you can go into more detail and then look at items. In this case, we want some sports shoes. I wish I had Silas's shoes photo right now here on me. But the idea is that we're going to select it. We're going to try to see what these sports shoes are about. And I'm going to try to figure out if I can afford them. And that's going to lead us into this idea of choice. Once we're in choice, the system, as a preloader, is going to read from everything else that you've tried to see if you can afford and give you a visualization of this. And this visualization is meant to help provide a concrete relationship, again, to this idea of the abstract money that credit has allowed. At the end, it gives you one last reminder. Taxes were up, but they came already. And I'm trying to visit Orlando next year, and this summer, it's close, and children's expenses are going to go up. Tanya, get ready for that. So then we're going to be looking at, we want these shoes. The system can recognize you're never necessarily going to be paying in credit card. In this case, we are going to choose that we're going to try to pay with a credit card, and we're going to try to pay with a Discover card. And so the issue here is how to understand that the credit card is not about that money that you pay now, but about the effects that it'll have once you don't pay. So if I pay this month, they're going to cost me this amount, but I can actually see that if I actually wait and wait a few series of months, now it's going to cost me $266. And I wait a year to repay it, it's going to cost me $368. And this is based on a standard interest rate on a credit card. And you can imagine people, and this is just it was a $148 expense. Imagine if you had a whole house that you put on it. You know, the system can allow you to see, well, if I want to see the effects, what if I choose cheaper shoes, and then I could go into it, etc. So in this whole idea, I've been talking about the system could recognize, the system could talk to you. So as the last study, this idea of feedback, and that the system, as I'm engaging with it, could also recognize what I'm doing. And it could say, you know what, this right now, it may be acceptable or it may be unacceptable. And it could just bring out these little moments of reflection within the larger interface. At the same moment, this idea that in the middle of the process, it could be a little bit more aggressive. So it could not only say that you're doing something wrong, but it could ask you a question that would try to help your behavior, or it could also give you a pat in the back for someone like Caroline who needs those reassurances, and could tell you that you're doing a good job. In another kind of way, there sometimes needs for aggressiveness to not be the necessary solution. So it could still be big, but be inside. But the idea would be, this about idea of time. Can this wait? Do you really need this now? Do you really need to think about it at this moment? And in the same way, if you did it right, would you want to think about your trip in Mexico? Now, of course, I did all of this, and now swine flu. Mexico's not as attractive, but the idea would be that also, if you start behaving well, the system recognizes this, and it tells you, you're getting closer to your goal this upcoming summer. So what's next? Where would I go from here? This idea that I've only looked at the mobile device, and of course there's many other components that I have to look at to make the system more manageable and more stronger in approach, particularly because if my biggest critique is this idea of engaging into a cycle of experience, a mobile device does not do that. A mobile device is just one part of this larger system, and I'm very aware that I need to go there. If I follow David Rose's receptivity gradient, again, this idea that I looked at people who are ready to act, which is kind of like, oh, well, they're ready to make a decision, but what happens when it's someone who just keeps putting cars on credit cards and doesn't care about what's coming after? Future things, formal language. I know that this language needs to be addressed, particularly this idea of the rewards and how can they be, how can they be a little bit paternalistic, but at the same time friendly to help me know that my behavior is not going well. This idea of how can this integrate into a real financial system, the idea of practicality that has come up today a few times, and the idea of role of credit in contemporary culture. The economy crisis right now will definitively change that, and it's a way to see how it goes. And then a final reflection, the idea of professional life and where I'm headed after. Last year I had a conversation with Denise where she hinted at me that focusing in is always a great thing because it allows you to make things better. Then last semester, Meredith brought this idea of how you can really go huge and then focus in very little, but I like that balance of trying to get projects where I can go really big and then choose in between. And I think that from this experience, the final project and last semester, that's where my professional life might go now. So thank you very much.